is the new Prime Minister wrong to scrap the Rwanda plan? Get your calls in for this one now. On his first full day in the job, Keir Starmer announced that the controversial scheme, which has so far cost £310 million, will be axed. Take a look.
Look, the Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent. The chances were of not going and not being processed and staying here, therefore, in paid-for accommodation for a very, very long time. It's had the complete opposite effect. And I'm not prepared to continue with gimmicks that don't act as a deterrent.
Instead, the Labour government is funneling some Rwanda cash into a new border security squad. Here's new Home Secretary Yvette Cooper explaining why she thinks that the Tory approach to stopping small boats is the wrong one.
Well, the Prime Minister has obviously set out the position on the Rwanda scheme, whereas we know the Conservatives ran this scheme for 2.5 years and sent simply 4 volunteers, as well as hundreds of millions of pounds. My key priority as incoming Home Secretary is to strengthen Britain's border security, where I think we have been let down for too long.
So is it a mistake to get rid of the Rwanda plan so quickly, especially when you consider how much money has already been spent? Or is it actually sensible to move on and maybe start fresh, Paula?
Of course it's sensible to move on and start afresh. We have wasted so much money and putting the money to one side. You know, Yvette reminded us, didn't she, that 4 went voluntarily. What she didn't tell us in that clip was, of course, we paid for 2 people to go. We paid them £3,000 each. The Rwanda plan is not a plan. It's just this kind of inchoate mixture of suggestions, proposals that nobody ever really backed. We know that Rishi Sunak didn't really back this. And as a Chancellor, he sat back and watched millions and millions and millions being poured into something that was just never going to work and was never going to act as a deterrent. Having said that, what worries me about the Labour government and the reality check that they need is pouring more money into border control is not going to be enough. If you want to claim asylum, you can only do that by landing in this country. OK, so that's an invitation then, isn't it, for me to come here in an unregulated way? Because how else am I going to claim asylum? The simple thing that we need to do, and the government know this, is to open up those legal routes by which we can claim asylum.
So why are they not doing it? Because Labour isn't going to do that either.
And who knows why? And I'm suspecting it's because they want to give an impression to the UK that if we pull up our borders, suddenly everyone will go away. Well, they won't, and they never have.
Do you think, James, getting rid of the Rwanda scheme is perhaps the wrong idea? When we have a problem with small boats, do we need to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it? So the Rwanda plan is already sort of in progress. Do that, do the gangs, do the border security team too, and everything else that goes with it.
I think, well, the problem I have with the scheme is that, look, we all know that throwing £300 million plus at something, and a scheme that we may have all had doubts about whether it would be effective and whether it would do its job, was a foolish thing at the time. Having said that, given that so much money and resource has been invested in it, and to my mind, given that so many European countries are looking at some kind of deportation plan, to simply throw it out as political meat, to say, look, we've done what we said we were going to do, we always said it was terrible, we've trashed it, is basically getting the 300 million quid, the equivalent of standing on the top of this building, getting some large suitcases and throwing the money off, which is, I think, a scant disregard to taxpayers' money. In addition to that, I have not heard of any alternatives that are going to work. And by the way, just by saying, oh, let's have legal and easy routes for people to come to this country. No,
legal,
I'm sorry.
Not easy, but legal.
Yes, look, we already have those. So if people want to come to this country, they're paying
not
thousands.
Not to claim asylum, James.
Thankfully not.
Because
there are a lot of people in this country who don't necessarily want to just allow that. We know that there are many people across the world who legitimately could claim asylum.
Yes.
Do we wish to?
But they can't.
Good, because we don't
James,
have the capacity. No, we don't have the capacity. I think we have to, as in conjunction with other countries, I think we have to work out how many people we can afford to give asylum to in any particular time. And I think that we should do it in conjunction with the French and the Germans and everywhere else, because we need to have a plan, because there are so many areas across the world which are war-torn and famine and plenty of reasons why people might want to come here.
And the climate impact that will have on us, absolutely.
If you want to pull that, drawstring,
I'm pulling it.
But the thing is that lawyers like you know, they'll always find a reason to find cases of which they can earn their money and to have all these sort of humanitarian reasons. We know there are plenty of people, but there are also plenty of people in this country who desperately need help, who desperately need support, and we cannot do it all. So I'm afraid you have to come up with priorities.
Well, there's two myths that we really need to bust here. The first is that we can't take any more, that we're somehow that we're somehow bursting at the seams.
I didn't say that.
So you agree with me? We can do our bit to help those who are in need.
Yes, but if you have a look,
we need to provide them with legal routes by which to do so. Otherwise, of course, we're handing them. No, we don't.
1.4 million people arrived on these shores in the last year, of which 635,000 net stayed. So we have
claiming asylum. James.
Yes, indeed.
Not claiming asylum. Those were through net migration. Those were here on the basis of their work
Legal
visas.
migration.
Absolutely.
But they're legal migration. But the thing is that asylum
and this is the problem.
Asylum
we
is also
the two.
We do conflate the two, and I agree that we need to have a very specific set of rules. But the thing is that when you have 80% of people claiming asylum and successfully, and they're able to get there, then it means, in my view, that perhaps the ability to claim is too easy and that we're making the bar too low in order that we need to be able to look after the people who arrive effectively. And I don't think that we or many other European or indeed the US countries are doing a good job with that.
OK, let's go to the phones. We've got two Nigels waiting. We're going to start with Nigel in Cornwall. What's your thoughts when it comes to Labour scrapping the Rwanda plan? Do you think that was sensible?
No, I think it's the right thing. Because the thing is, you know, all these boats are coming across. No one seems to be stopping them. I think Britain now needs to close its borders to illegal migration.
OK.
The Rwanda thing...
How are you going to do that? Are you going to put a border all the way along the full coast of Britain? I mean, that's an impossibility, Nigel, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, when they land, they should be sent straight back. It's as simple as that.
To where?
Back to France.
OK, but that's quite difficult, isn't it, James, since Brexit?
It is. Well, it was difficult before Brexit, in the sense that you can't just, you know, we've signed a whole range of treaties in the past and currently, Nigel. So much as I understand what you say, and there are plenty of people around the country who are going, yes, just send them back, put gunboats in the channel, all this sort of business. It's not going to work because of the treaties that we've signed across the world, and also the legitimate reasons why people might be able to claim asylum. And so, as a result of that, that means that is not a workable policy, much as you might like it.
And also, Nigel, out of the people that are coming over here in small boats, more of them than not are granted asylum in this country, which means they have reason to be here, and it means they are facing persecution from their original country, their country of origin.
Well,
isn't that rather cruel to just send them back somewhere, send them back to their country of origin, somewhere where they could be persecuted, killed?
Well, may I make it, from what I understand from the EU laws years ago, the first country they come into the EU, they're meant to stay there. But they're crossing the whole of Europe to come to Britain.
Yes, and when we were in the EU, we were able to have discussions more freely with France to say that you have to keep them. I think the Dublin Agreement was in place.
We're signatories of the Dublin Agreement.
But the problem is now that we've left Brexit, that we've Brexited rather, that's not in place, Paula.
And it's not in place. And everything has to be, Nigel, it's about the individual agreements that we're going to reach. And yes, we reached an individual agreement, for example, with Albania, which saw a significant reduction in Albanians making that dangerous crossing across the channel. And it's those kind of agreements that we need to reach. But my argument is, Nigel, the reason why Rwanda was never going to work is because the numbers simply didn't add up. And then secondly, we do have a moral duty, don't we, to ensure that people in desperate need are cared for.
The thing is, why isn't France keeping them on their side? They're just letting them come across and not doing anything to stop them. And Britain's paying millions.
But they do keep them. Understand that we are actually fifth. We're fifth in the tally in terms of the amount of unregulated asylum seekers that are coming into our country. France are on top of us. Germany are on top of us. Nigel, Austria are on top of us. They take more than we do.
But it's become a real significant problem. And
I agree.
It's become a problem that's, for example, when you go to France, I don't know about you, but certainly when I've driven through and you see the tented cities and you see all of these people, that we in Western Europe have not worked out how to deal with this. And I do think that some kind of flight plan, repatriation or sending elsewhere or doing something is going to be the solution that we have to have. But wouldn't it be stronger or better if all the countries said, look, this is what's going to happen. These are the rules. This is what we're prepared to accept. These are the numbers, and when we're full, we're full.
So are we going back into the EU to do that?
Well,
James?
you don't have to go back into the EU to come up with a sensible plan that benefits them and us.
OK, Nigel, thank you very much for your call. That's Nigel from Cornwall. We're going to speak to Nigel from Warwickshire now. What's your view on the Rwanda plan? Are you glad that it's gone, dead and buried now?
Let's shoot the fox about the EU for starters. None of you mentioned the EU Migration Pact. If we were still in the EU, we would be obligated by law, EU law, to take over 150,000 migrants every year. So let's forget about Brexit, please, for starters. Secondly, if I were collecting survivors from the Titanic and I came across over 90% of the survivors being young, virile males, I think that'd be a bit odd.
Virile is a weird description of them. Why is that important?
No, I would find it a bit odd, wouldn't you? I mean, my definition of a refugee...
Isn't somebody that's in the worst moment of their life a person regardless of gender or age or virility?
Yeah. Well, someone who comes over here and then gets the Archbishop of Canterbury to convert them to Christianity so they can't go back, and then doesn't practice Christianity, I don't think they're really a refugee, do you?
OK, so it sounds like, well, I don't know is the truth, Nigel, but it sounds very much like you have an issue with our processes in this country, and you have a problem with the demographic of people seeking refuge in this country. Would that be a fair statement?
I think we should allow people, true refugees, real refugees, whoever they are, but primarily women, children and elderly people. That would be my focus.
Is that a suggestion then that men can't be true refugees?
Well, I think most people would think the most vulnerable people in society are women, children and elderly people. Maybe you don't think so, but I do.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just questioning whether a male can ever be an asylum seeker or a refugee, whether they can ever be truly in need of help.
A male should be trying to help the women and children. That's a man's fundamental responsibility in life, is to protect women and children. So if a man walks away from them, I would have total contempt for them, frankly.
So Nigel, don't you think that is the reason why it's the male that we see more often or not doing that dangerous, life-threatening journey rather than the female or the young child? And we do see females and young children, sadly, who are then caught up in the sex trafficking industry, who don't make it because they are used as drug mules, etc. So, of course, it's going to be the strongest person who is going to leave the family in Syria, for example, and make that treacherous route.
I think it's very odd that you talk about these people who come from cultures who treat women like absolute dirt.
Well,
I mean, you don't know what's happening in Afghanistan, surely?
OK, Nigel, that is your view, and I suppose a lot of people that are in Afghanistan now, it's been taken over by the Taliban, who have been, I suppose, much harsher on the women in that community and much stricter with the women in that community than perhaps previous iterations of the government there, that they might want to leave and they feel persecuted at the moment, Nigel, but thank you very much for your call. Mark on X says, a friendly, cooperative third country is one answer. The other is that Labour do not intend to deport or remove illegal immigrants at all. Tommy on Twitter says, Rwanda has never been given a chance to happen. The same people who stopped dangerous criminals from being deported made sure of that. Who's he referring to then? Lawyers, perhaps?
Lefty lawyers.
Lefty lawyers. Look,
soft judges.
I mean, the thing that I find so abominable about all of this is the amount of money that's been thrown at, I'm sorry, but lawyers and the legal system, and people basically using that system in order to make a huge amount of money. We've seen the trafficking gangs exploiting perhaps the most vulnerable in order to make a huge amount of money. And it seems to be that...
So just to be clear, you're equating lawyers with trafficking gangs?
I think I would put them both in the basket case of taking money that they shouldn't.
Wow.
Okay, let's go to the calls then. Thomas from Lincolnshire. What's your view on, I suppose, how to stop small boats crossing? Because that's the dangerous crossing we want to stop from happening. Do we target the gangs? Was the Rwanda plan a good deterrent, if nothing else?
Morning, hello, how are you? All right?
All good, thank you, Thomas.
Right, I think for me, personally, it's not a deterrent anymore because we've got rid of the Rwanda plan. And also, when it comes to by-election, the Conservatives and Reform's going to win seat after seat after seat.
OK, there's quite a lot to cover there. We're not really talking about by-elections, but you think that actually the Conservatives are going to make a comeback?
Oh, yeah, I'm Reform because if they're doing nothing to stop immigration, well, with no deterrent saying, well, we're going to send you to Rwanda, we're going to send you here, there and everywhere, people are just going to come nearly will it. The gang is going to go, hey, it's happy days, and away we go.
So hold on, it sounds like you don't have any faith in Keir Starmer at all in his ability to stop the small boats crossing. He wants to target the gangs. He's using lots of money to put into a border force team that he thinks is the way to stop these crossings, but it doesn't sound like you've got much faith in that.
Well, no, when I used to speak to James in the morning on his morning show, and I've told him I don't like Keir Starmer or anybody like that. I don't like Labour, full stop. I don't trust them.
OK, so you don't trust them to do the job. Thomas, thank you very much for your call. Lynn from Glasgow, Rwanda, was it right to scrap it?
Good morning, Storm. Yeah, I do think it was right to scrap it. I think the amount of money that was spent on it was absolutely ridiculous.
But it's already spent.
It shouldn't, in my mind, it shouldn't have been spent in the first place. It was a ridiculous, gimmicky idea. But what I would like to ask is, we have British consulates and embassies all over the world. Is there not a way that we can attach a processing centre to them so that people don't even need to go near the gangs? They can go to a British embassy or a British consulate and have
a legal route in place for them. Certainly there were other parties that wanted to open up more safe and legal routes. It could mean that we would have more migration, which a lot of people potentially would be against. But what it would potentially do is reduce the amount of people doing that dangerous crossing.
Well, it would. So, say for example,
Paula, but why does the Conservatives certainly and Labour now not do that?
Well, I don't know why they haven't come up with easier and safer routes, and this does actually come down to cooperation. And I think that the whole using consulates or having processing centres overseas. So, for example, if they'd left the infrastructure of the Rwanda plan in place and said, look, we are going to come up with an alternative, which is these are the safe routes. If you don't use them, then the second you arrive, off on the plane. Then that is going to be a far better and stronger way. But what I haven't seen from any political party is a range of measures which actually work, because you actually have to do a whole range of things, and I agree there do have to be safe routes. I think that we need to rejig what the rules say so that we're clearer about who can come and the tests that they have to do. I think we have to be quicker with processing so it's less expensive and we waste less money keeping people in hotels and hostels for months if not years on end. I think we've got to be much better at tracking people and making sure that people who come to this country are tracked, and so that we know whether they stay or not. And I think that we've got to spend taxpayers' money more effectively. And I do think that it comes down to who are the people that we really want to help, where do we have empathy, and who's extracting the Michael and who needs to be shipped off.
OK, well, listen, sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Lynn, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this.